Good afternoon from the surprisingly sunny and warm Copenhagen. Welcome to the webinar Blockchain and Sustainable Energy in Development and Cooperation, hosted by Copenhagen Center on Energy Efficiency. My name is Aris. I'm working as a project officer at the Copenhagen Center, and I'm supporting the activities related to energy efficiency webinars. A couple of things before we move to the main content of our webinar. The webinar is going to be about 75 minutes long, including time for questions at the end of the presentations. In case you cannot stay until the end or want to get back to our interesting presentations, all the materials and the recording of the whole webinar will be available online in a few days on the Copenhagen Center Knowledge Management System. And we have many other webinars and information there. Have a look, and I'll provide more information in a few minutes. A few things about the Copenhagen Center. The Center conducts research and advisory activities in the field on energy efficiency and serves as energy efficiency hub for the Sustainable Energy for All initiative. The Center has an established network of global, regional, and national partners with a broad range of stakeholders to help accelerate the implementation of energy efficiency activities. On a regular basis, the Copenhagen Center is conducting webinars. All materials, including recordings and presentations from previous webinars, can be found on Copenhagen Center Knowledge Management System under the e-learning section. The material of today's webinar will be uploaded shortly. Now, I would like to briefly introduce the speaker of today's webinar. First is Gabriela. Gabriela is the acting head of the Copenhagen Center on Energy Efficiency. Then it's going to be Viktor. Viktor is working as a senior blockchain government expert at the GIZ Blockchain Lab. Then is James. James is a senior analyst at Power Ledger. Later it's going to be Dumitru, who is a policy specialist, innovation lead for UNDP in Moldova. And the last is going to be Francois, who is the co-founder of ElectriCChain. Finally, I would like to inform that you can send us your questions during the presentations, and we will do our best to answer as many as we can after the end of all the presentations. Please do not forget to mention the name of the panelist that the question is for. And now I would like to give the floor to Gabriela.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about not only energy efficiency, but also on these new opportunities associated with blockchain. Actually, we are focusing the core of our work on energy efficiency. And some time ago, together with two other colleagues from UNEP-DTU partnership, which are called Ana Cardoso and Marco Schletzer, we've been looking at if there would be any opportunities for energy efficiency within blockchain. And thinking about that, we decided to test and do a bit of research of our own to test whether this would be something we should spend some time on, and if actually there would be any opportunities there. So I'm going to go quickly through it, and I would just like to leave a few messages on what we came across, on what could be opportunities, perhaps to develop further research and analysis within this field. So we started as wondering, in the new context or the recent developments of international policy developments regarding energy transition within the Paris Climate Agreement and the Sustainable Energy Goals, how to move to a more decarbonized energy sector, and if there would be any opportunities there for blockchain. We have been recently seeing that there are some opportunities associated with renewable energies, and perhaps we will listen to a few of them today. But also we together with a more consumer-centered organization of the energy markets, and also with energy efficiency. So all this policy framework and technological developments are giving us some new configurations of the market that perhaps would lead to opportunities in these fields. And also this development of technologies is bringing to the consumer a context or a modus of operation that are more related to energy as a service rather than selling kilowatt hours and cubic meters of gas. So now we're looking at mobility, we are looking at lighting, we are looking at heating, we are looking at cooling. So this is the service that energy can provide. So in this context, how do we manage this service? How do we sell this service? And how do we consume, between commas, this service? So we started from here, given this policy and technological context and the evolution of the energy market, and wondered if there would be some opportunities beyond cryptocurrencies and the possibilities that blockchain would provide regarding as a registration chain of exchanges between parties. We have identified a few pilot examples of peer-to-peer in renewable energies. We have also identified other solutions that are going to be presented here today in this webinar. But then we were a bit challenged by thinking, what about energy efficiency? Is there a role for blockchain within this field? So first we started to identify the obstacles to the realization of energy efficiency potential. What are the typical burdens to the full implementation of energy efficiency? And this is valid for developed countries and developing countries. So one of the focus of this webinar today. We would like to see how we could come across some of these barriers. And there's a wealth of literature associated with this, which are basically related to actual market mechanisms, how the markets function, and how energy efficiency can come across and be implemented throughout the world. There is also financial issues associated. It's very often that we hear and read that there's no money available, or whether we cannot access to funding to develop these energy efficiency projects. Also associated with information, also lack of information of the population or of the actors that should really implement energy efficiency. Or there is a lack, or there is a misregulation associated that is hindering the deployment of energy efficiency, or any other technical issues. When we were thinking about all these blockchain issues, and we thought probably let's try and make it simple as a first step, and analyze the most obvious opportunities within blockchain, which would be trying to hinder the financial barriers associated with the deployment of energy efficiency. And here within this field, while we identified, going into more detail, we identified that very often energy efficiency projects are small projects. And when the developers of these projects try to reach out to funding or financing institutions, sometimes there's lack of capacity on that side. The actual people dealing with providing loans or whatever other type of financial capacity, lack of instruction, and lack of capacity of understanding of energy efficiency projects. Associated with small projects, we also figure out that when we are talking about small projects, perhaps there's a huge amount of transaction costs associated. So it's better to have bigger projects rather than small projects. So all of this creates a difficulty to access finance and access debt. For example, if we talk about municipalities, if they want to do simple projects of lighting retrofitting, they sometimes, if they are a small municipality, they have difficulties to get access to debt, and therefore cannot develop the projects. So starting from here, we then decided to look on 2 or 3 case studies where blockchain could be eventually implemented. So the first one we thought of was about energy efficiency certificates. So this in some European countries and also some Australian states, there are in place this type of certificates which states that energy utilities under a specific regulation have to deploy energy efficiency, and there is actual verification mechanism and the regulatory authority involved, and these white certificates could be transacted in the market and between utilities, and therefore this is a market operation that is ongoing within the conventional type of development. And then we try to replicate that within a theoretical model of using blockchain. And here we came across that probably the utility would have to make the energy efficiency intervention like in the conventional model. And then we would have perhaps a smart meter reading the savings and then registering them on a blockchain, and through the blockchain a white certificate could be issued. And then if there's a need to transaction of these white certificates, this could also be done, and this market could be also be developed through or based on a blockchain solution. So this was the first application that we could think of that possibly there's a potential here to develop if countries would like to engage on that. Probably there should be issues related to the verification of the actual energy savings and the actual energy intervention. But this is just a first approach, a first research analysis that on a potential opportunity that could perhaps on a later stage could be picked up by somebody to further develop. And then the second application we could think of would be, for example, thinking about energy service companies or energy performance contracting associated with them, and perhaps also with crowdfunding. So on the left-hand side, you can see on the ESCO traditional model is that the energy service company would make a loan to a bank, and with that money they would invest on energy efficiency and provide this energy efficiency service to a facility owner, which could be a building, a factory, or any other kind of energy use. And with that, so with the savings and through an energy performance contracting, then this facility owner would pay the service fee directly to the ESCO. When we think of ESCO blockchain-based model, then we would perhaps could base our loan on a crowdfunding solution where we would have a multiplicity of investors that through blockchain-based technology would bring the financing needs to the ESCO that could then perform the same energy efficiency service to the facility owner. And then the service fee could also be repaid or be paid through the blockchain to the ESCO, and the loan repaid back to the crowdfunders also through the blockchain. So these were two of the first case studies that we could think of. Again, these are all theoretical approaches. We haven't tested them actually yet. And we could see also that perhaps there are issues with monitoring and verification and control, that actually all these contracts are actually well monitored and verified. So it's not that the blockchain would solve everything regarding this, but could be a possibility to further look ahead. And the final one, final application that we could think of would be based on flexible energy demand and supply. So now it's taking advantage not only of decentralized renewables, but also on the Internet of Things and smart appliances and the possibility to remotely control and have all the smart metering associated with the home. We could exchange information related to the energy use and actually control decentralizedly the energy use of each of the consumers and its relationship to the neighbors or to their utility present in that specific place. Again, this is also a theoretical model. We also, perhaps in this one, would be where we see most problems arising, because as a physical asset, energy needs to be controlled centrally. It's the nature of the electricity grid that we have, and also do not have confidentiality associated with it, because the grid operator needs to know exactly, perhaps also in advance, how much energy is going to be produced and consumed, and where it's going to go and from where it's coming. So also possibly this is an opportunity to further study, but it's not without any technical issues to be sorted out. So these were basically the three main applications that we started thinking of. And perhaps this would lead to further research and further development from our center. So as a conclusion from this start of research, we understood that blockchain, is a nascent technology. So it's a very recent technology that is becoming available. It's a big hype around it. It demands heavy computational power, which also could bring issues around energy efficiency and energy demand associated with it, and also the interoperability of between different blockchains that could perhaps exist at the same time on a very close relationship with each other. So how would they speak to each other, and how would they work to each other? And also decentralization versus regulation. We, in the energy field, we have a very historic, very centralized model of deployment, and moving very fast to decentralization with the opportunities around renewable energies and energy efficiency. How is this going to impact on the operation of the whole electricity system and the whole regulatory issues around that? And then when with this huge speed of evolution of these technologies, and we also see there's a risk associated with it, because if one specific blockchain solution is chosen for solving some of the issues, will it be soon outdated in relation to other blockchain solutions that could come across? So these are some of the many questions that we came across during the development of this small piece of research, and we would like to share it with you. So perhaps even to have your views on this. And with this, I finish my presentation. Thank you very much for your for listening, and happy to take some questions from you at the end. Thank you. Back to Aris then.
Thank you, Gabriela, for your interesting presentation. Now, Viktor, you have the floor.
Perfect. Very warm welcome from my side. I hope you can see my screen in a second. So, as Aris told you, I'm working for the GIZ blockchain lab, to be more precisely, and I will today tell you my thoughts or tell you about our pilot project on electricity mini and microgrids, which we are planning in an African country starting mid next year. Maybe just a short background from my side. I've been working in the energy sector before joining the GIZ, and I've been working with digital technologies, and obviously blockchain is one of the most promising digital technologies, especially in the energy sector. And I think this is also well known that after the financial sector, maybe the insurance sector, the electricity or the energy sector in general is the most promising with blockchain. Well, at least that's my opinion. So what is the GIZ? What do we do within our GIZ blockchain lab? The GIZ is the German implementing agency for the development context. So we are not state-run, but we do get most of our projects from the German government, but as well as from the EU. And we have 20,000 employees. We are currently based in 130 countries and have about 1,500 projects. Our task within the GIZ blockchain lab is, well, basically we started out analyzing the sustainable development goals of the UN and try to find suitable solutions in getting the goals out of the SDGs. We came up with 150 ideas at the beginning, which might benefit the sustainable development goals, and we narrowed them down step by step. At some point we had 15, and currently we are focusing on 4 different sustainable or 4 different ideas to in any way achieve some of the sustainable development goals. Apart from the energy sector or our energy project, we have projects in insurance, in education credentials, and in supply chains. So to sum it up, our vision, it's very simply put, we want to find decentralized governance models for a better world. We're not coders, we do work with coders. Our head of Blockchain Lab is a computer scientist, the rest of us are not. So what is our position within the whole blockchain ecosystem? We have a very privileged position as we don't have any evangelist approach within our goals. We are an honest broker in the middle of the blockchain space. So we are somewhere between the blockchain ecosystem, mainly consisting of startups, but increasingly also by corporates on the left side, and multilateral organizations, national governments and local institutions, and obviously our GIZ projects abroad. So we're trying to connect bits and atoms more or less. So bits would mean that we are trying to get innovators, and atoms, the societal stakeholders, together to pursue projects in one way or another. So I will elaborate on one GIZ project which we plan on doing with blockchain base. We have another one in our energy portfolio which focuses on cross-border electricity wholesale trading, which is also very, very interesting, but it is actually in a more advanced state, in a more advanced planning state than our other project, but still I decided to go for the idea we have for mini and microgrids. So what is the general situation? When you look at distributed ledger technology, we see that the promises or the key advantages of DLT solutions are very much aligning with the needs of the electricity sector. So what do we need within the electricity sector? We need transparency, obviously, to ensure that we know what's going on within the grid, how much is generated at some point or another. We also need some sort of disintermediation. And as you all know, DLT solutions are a perfect way to get the intermediary out of the game, because we're creating trust through technology, not through authority. And this might not be a huge issue in countries which are more democratic or where people trust their institutions. But as soon as we leave those very privileged few countries, we see that these authorities don't have the power they might need to grant their citizens the rights they deserve. We also need a very resilient and secure IT infrastructure when talking about electricity systems, and blockchain or DLT systems are a very resilient and secure IT infrastructure. This is also well known that the first blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain, hasn't been hacked yet, and I think this will stay for at least a few years. Let's wait for quantum computing, so then we have to talk again. Also, the promises of DLT solutions include the whole topic of inclusion, because it lowers significantly the potential entry barriers one person might have to enter those systems. And also, and this is especially very interesting for the electricity sector, blockchains or DLTs offer a high level of automation because we have a very high level of data integrity, so we know what's going on within grids, generation, distribution, whatsoever. So we have the opportunity to automate contracts and processes, and thus leveraging the potentials of a highly efficient process. Yes. So what do we have in our project? So currently, and I'm also very sorry that I can't specify the African country, so we will talk about the African country, and hopefully I will not at some point name it. What is the setup? We have a GIZ project up and running in this African country, and they are focusing on rural electrification. It's an off-grid location, so we don't have to deal with any connectivity issues. Currently, the power is generated via diesel generators. We have little to no grid connectivity also within these microgrids or from one microgrid to another. And we also don't have any incentives to invest in renewables, because in particularly this country, it is rather cheap to get diesel, and it's way cheaper than installing solar panels or anything. And yeah, the setup also contains that payments and the systems underlying it are very limited in terms of automation and digitization. So basically, you will have to pay upfront and you have to do it with cash. Some other things which are not mentioned on this slide. We also have, when we come thinking about blockchain-based solutions for this setup, we don't have any regulatory hurdles. On the opposite, we have very positive signals by the regulatory authorities in this country that we can and should use blockchain solutions for those rural microgrids. We also don't have any utilities which are interested in electrifying these certain grids, these certain areas of the country. And we also have very few production facilities within those soon-to-be microgrids. So basically, most of them are private households, which makes it in some way easier to balance grids, etc. And as I've mentioned, the GIZ is already working in this country, and it's not something which we just got and try to do it with a blockchain. Even apart from the whole blockchain thing, these areas would have been electrified in a traditional way. So what are we trying to do? Basically, we're trying to do everything which is possible with blockchains. So these grids will be, well, some of them will be pilots, and we want to make sure that we try out different possibilities with blockchains. So this means that we will also have a very strong scientific research accompanying our pilots, and we will evaluate at some point if everything worked out as we intended. So what are we trying to do? Well, at first we want to look into finance solutions. So we want to give the people, the local population, the opportunity to invest in their own assets and in their own renewable assets by using a blockchain. This is not something which we want to have as a crowdfunding platform so that Europeans or others will invest or donate. We want people, the local population, to be in charge of their own assets. Also, we want to try to build up payment settlements based on blockchain, which are obviously linked to smart meters. Smart meters are key in this whole thing. We are trying to find the most, the thinnest of the smart meters we can get. All the different projects here, which I will also elaborate in a few seconds or in a few minutes, will not be done by one provider. We also are trying, or we are highly encouraging different blockchain startups to approach us to pitch their ideas, and by mid of next year we will get into the whole process where we find the right solutions. So we don't dismiss private or public solutions. We are very open to that. Well, for some of these cases or some of these ideas I'm elaborating on, we do have some people in mind, obviously, but this does not mean that there are any decisions made. So what we also want to do, and I'm coming over to the second point, we are trying to find grid solutions. So based on smart meters for the households, for the production facilities there, we want in the first step to monitor the grid, which is establishing step by step. So we're building the grid from ground up and use blockchain to monitor and to get some very high level data out of it, so that we can in the next step also go into the direction of balancing this whole grid and in some way making the smart meters responsive to signals of the grid to shut down or to maybe use more electricity. So a highly digitized grid would be the outcome. And also, and this is also something which Gabriela already told in her presentation, we're not focusing on, but we are assuming that the more blockchain solutions we will apply, the more new electricity products we will get. So obviously one thing would be peer-to-peer markets. And as I've mentioned, no utilities involved or interested in this rural electrification areas. So people might be incentivized to share or to sell, to be more precisely, their electricity to neighbors, and thus enabling a local energy market. And if we talk about our long-term vision, it could also mean that maybe this grid, which runs on blockchain, will at some point connect itself to the other grid, which is maybe 10 kilometers away, and maybe sell their spare electricity to it. So thus creating a new market for electricity, and maybe giving new incentives for the people in the first grid to invest more, as there are new export opportunities, more or less. And also, and this is, in my opinion, very interesting, we will create a new market for green energy, basically, because in this country we're talking about, there is no market for renewable energy. And I mean, blockchain is obviously one of the best tools to track generation and distribution to some degree of green energy. So this might be a new product which might be at some point subsidized, or we will see. Maybe it does not need to be subsidized. Maybe it will be just a very strong marketing argument so that people can sell 100% green energy. So this was it from my side. A very short presentation. I'm sorry that I couldn't go more into detail, but we're very happy that this project will take place by mid of next year. And if you have any questions, or if you have any suggestions, any great ideas, what we should maybe implement apart from our ideas, feel free to contact me. You have my contact data right in front of the screen, and obviously the slides will be also shared, so there you will have the possibility to get my email address as well. So yeah, once again, thank you for having me. I will be on the line, and maybe there are some questions later on.
Thank you, Victor. So my name is James Eggleston. I'm from PowerLedger. A little bit about PowerLedger. We're a distributed ledger for distributed energy markets. We've been around for about 4 years. We had proof of concept quite a while ago using the Bitcoin blockchain, where we were doing microgrids with solar PV facilitating peer-to-peer trading. Quite a lot has changed since then, particularly in the blockchain space. New technologies have come in, and blockchains with much more speed and scale have become available. And now we have I guess you could say, a standardized platform that we are distributing to energy markets around the globe for settling transactions. So as covered off by some of the previous presenters today, what we're seeing is a transition in the way we deliver energy. And Victor from GIZ pointed out that what we're seeing is the rise of local energy markets, or interconnected local energy markets, which are referred to in the literature. However, what we're pivoting from is a centralized model. So a centralized model for delivery of electricity, it has provided us secure, reliable electricity at a reasonably cost-effective manner. However, as newer distributed technologies come in, that technologies that are generally renewable and can be located closer to the point of consumption, those technologies energy pricing from those technologies is much lower by virtue of the fact that less infrastructure has been used to transmit that electricity. So what we're starting to see is the levelized cost of energy from distributed renewables and storage starting to compete and become more affordable, much more resilient, less carbon intensive, and much more dependable for consumers. And so as part of that transition, what PowerLedger and where blockchain technology, I guess, as a whole comes into play is in the acceleration of that trend, the acceleration from a centralized model for delivery of electricity towards a decentralized model. I mean, bear in mind, some of the first large-scale generators, they were going in around the time that the jukebox was invented, but we don't see many jukeboxes anymore. However, we still see quite a large centralized model. I guess I'll also point out that not everyone in the world has access to electricity. So the centralized model, while it seems to serve, most of us probably watching this presentation, it doesn't serve everyone, because if you live in a village that's too far away to send a transmission line out, and no business case in order to build that infrastructure, those people don't have electricity, and that actually is 16% of the world's population. So about 1.2 billion people where that model has failed. Furthermore, just under 40% of the world's population, while they do have access to electricity, they don't have access to electricity for cooking. So in those areas, they're burning wood, coal, any material for cooking, and that accounts for a large amount of emissions across the globe. You can't blame the victim in that sense. I mean, those people, it's a centralized model that has failed them. So what we're starting to see is distributed technology starting to enter the fore. In fact, it's already happening. And once again, what it does is it enables generation to be placed closer to the point of consumption. And what blockchain does, or what our blockchain platform does, is it effectively provides a meter reading, invoicing, and settlement service. And it does that in an automatic way, in a way that's much more affordable than business as usual. And one of the risks in a centralized network is network defection. So for instance, I'm calling into this presentation from Australia. In Australia, 1 in 4 of our households have solar PV. And the reason people are putting solar PV on is largely for economic reasons. People aren't necessarily doing it for any ideological driver. Now, what that means for networks, particularly in a country like Australia, and Australia is a good microcosm for the rest of the world, because what we have is a very large landmass with a very Spartan population. So a landmass equivalent in size to North America, but a population of 25 million. So what that means is we have a lot of infrastructure to get energy to our households, because no one wants to live next door to the centralized generator. However, that's pushed up energy prices to a point where now it's cheaper to have a solar panel on your rooftop and avoid buying energy from during the day. And as battery technology now has entered and the cost curve for battery is following the same trend as solar, one of the risks for a network operator is that there will be widespread grid defection, and we're starting to see that already. So being from the energy sector, I myself come from the government policy space within that. What we were thinking about is, how can we capitalize on that asset that already exists, the poles and wires on the street? How can we avert this notion of the energy death spiral? And so our solution to that is by turning the poles and wires on the street into a transactive layer, into a trading platform, almost Uber the energy market, in the sense that what you can do is just like Uber doesn't own any vehicles, you can have an entity that is an application host of our software that incentivizes people to use their assets. So in this case, it could be solar PV on rooftops, it could be batteries. And what they can then do is use the poles and wires on the streets to sell energy surplus, thus providing the revenue incentive for them to stay connected and to actually generate a revenue or profit or surplus and a benefit from being connected to that network. In our country, in Australia, and also countries more broadly, some networks are privatized, some networks are public. So in the publicly owned or owned by the taxpayer example, these networks, it would be a horrible tragedy for those taxpayers to have a network become a stranded asset. So providing that incentive mechanism to connect to the network means that those people will interact with that network in a way that they've never done before. And we've seen this transition already occurring to the telecommunications sector, where we saw entities moving from hard signals and switching between individual consumers to moving into more of a data model, leveraging the same assets and putting in some new ones, some new hardware, but using that network in a way that was never imagined. So Power Ledger, before I get into our existing projects, I'll just talk through some of the applications that we offer. I'll also point out that these are off-the-shelf applications. So if you tell us how many users you have, send us information on what smart meter you're using, provide us the volume of energy you expect to trade over a given time interval, and whether or not you're using a fixed daily supply charge or a meter reading charge. We have these off the shelf ready for you to use. So just starting from the top left, we have across the grid. So this application we generally provide to electricity retailers. We've got a number of applications across the world, not just in Australia. We also do microgrids, so that could be in the form of an off-grid microgrid with battery and solar or wind, but it also could be an apartment building or an embedded network within a greater network. We have a virtual power plant product. So what we're seeing now with the rise of battery technology and renewable technology is those distributed assets being able to be considered as one entity, hence the name virtual power plant. So, say 100 or 1,000 batteries can be conceived of as one big battery. And then those batteries can not only peer-to-peer trade between one another, but they're also able to enter the ancillary services market. So they can start to play in the frequency market. They can start to play in load balancing events, in voltage stabilization, in shaving the shoulders and reducing the peaks during peak times. And I'll talk more about some of those projects. But what that means, I guess, for the consumer is that when you have a kilowatt hour in your battery, at some point during the day, it would be most advantageous to trade that energy. However, in say a frequency market event, at that point, there would be more value for that battery to provide that kilowatt hour for the network. So that provides the revenue incentive for the, I guess, the consumer's battery to continue to seek the best deal for that energy. And what we're seeing is these new service innovations given rise by this new technology. I guess what you could say, in line with transition theory, that a technological transition can be a societal transformation. So we're also providing charging transactive layer for electric vehicles. So that could be in the form of connecting a electric vehicle in your apartment building to your microgrid. So that would connect well with the UGrid platform. We also provide a PowerPort is also a battery replacement type tool. So when you look at the future predictions around electric vehicle charging, at the moment we have a series of cables you can plug in, but there are technologies that are probably over the horizon that are coming in terms of non-contact charging, but the transition to that would likely be battery replacement. So PowerPort, we at this point have live projects for charging vehicles from solar and battery through a charging station, but also adaptable for any innovation that is further down the line. And C6 and C6 Plus. So we've also provide using the blockchain data. So once we recognize how much energy is being generated on the site, and that's being written to a blockchain, our blockchain, then what we do is we actually, in the case of some of our projects, we're using that data to report to the government of that state or country to then redeem carbon credits in line with their federal policy. So what we're doing then is just using the data that we're already acquiring and using it to the benefit of the client to report how much renewable energy was generated. And finally, this month we are releasing a light paper. So you may, for those that are familiar with the cryptocurrency space, you may have heard the term white paper. We released our white paper and had our token generation event some time ago, and it went well above our expectations. And what that has enabled us to do is think about other ways that we can provide value for our customers, for our community. And the way in which we see that moving forward is in asset germination. So what asset germination is when you look at the crypto markets in whole, I think today there's about $220 billion worth of value on coin market cap. So asset germination is allowing people to use cryptocurrency to germinate renewable generation and storage assets around the globe. And what we can do is facilitate anyone to participate in that event, and it won't work the same way as crowdfunding. We're releasing our paper later this month, and we'll be launching this with an absolute bang. I wish there was more I could say about that right now, but you'll have to wait and follow our Telegram or follow us on Twitter. So we have a dual token system where we have a cryptocurrency, which is the power token. Consumers who are transacting electricity never see the power token. What the power token is it's almost an energy bond. So for instance, when an energy retailer approaches us to use our software, what we do is we provide a quote to them, and we have an initial licensing fee, which what we then do is we take that payment and we acquire our power token off the secondary market, and then we hold that in escrow. So in a few years' time, and we yet to have someone that's decided not to use the platform after using it, that person wants to leave the platform or no longer use the software, what we do is we cash in that cryptocurrency and then pay them back. Now, if the cryptocurrency, if the power token's increased in value, then what we do is we return the greater value to that client or application host. On the consumer side, so when energy is being transacted on our platform, consumers are transacting a cryptographic token called a spark. The spark is unique to each application host, And in each currency around the world, 1 spark is the lowest denomination of that currency. So in Australia, it's 1 cent. In America, it's 1 cent. I presume in Europe, it would be a euro cent. So those digital cryptographic tokens are not listable on an exchange. They're only redeemable through the application host. So they work, although we offer post-pay and prepay models, they work similar to a prepaid mobile phone service where you buy 10 points, or in our case 10 sparks, and you wouldn't expect the value to change. The value never changes. So as a consumer consumes a kilowatt hour of electricity, if that kilowatt hour of electricity is 10 cents per kilowatt hour, 10 of those sparks or digital tokens leave their digital wallet and return to the point of generation. And at the end of the billing period, if the consumer has no more sparks in their wallet, they make a payment to the energy retailer, just like you currently do, and then those digital sparks are then transferred to the customer's digital wallet, and the process continues. If that consumer is a prosumer, so a producer and a consumer of electricity, they'll also be receiving sparks into their digital wallet, because as they export energy from their solar panel into the network, some of that energy is being consumed by the neighbor, and the neighbor, their sparks are being sent to the generator of that electricity. And for obviously that solar panel is not going to provide the entire neighbor's needs. So some of the other energy they're buying, sparks will be flowing back to that point of generation as well. For the prosumer that ends up with a net surplus of sparks, they can redeem that for the home currency through the energy retailer offering our service. So I've talked a lot about our platform, where we see the markets going, and I guess the products that we offer. But let's talk about our projects. So we have a series of global deployments, a number of projects in North America. We basically, ultimately what we're doing for most of our projects is providing the XGrid or UGrid software service, but we are also, the carbon credits software is also active in the States as well. So the most exciting, I won't describe every dot here. We have all this information available on our website. I'll talk through just some of the newer, larger scale projects. So in North America, we've partnered with Silicon Valley Power in California. And what we're doing is we're using our PowerPort software, facilitating energy transactions in a series of large scale parking garages that offer electric vehicle charging using solar PV and battery storage on site. In addition to providing the transactive layer, we're also providing we're also conducting the carbon credit piece, where we are using the blockchain data to accurately report to the Californian state government at these sites, this is how much renewable energy was generated, and this is how much is being used to power electric vehicles, because in the state of California, they have an LCFS, or a low carbon fuel standard. So a particular carbon credit, if that green energy was used for powering an electric vehicle. Moving towards Southeast Asia, our most recently announced project in Southeast Asia is conducting energy transactions over Bangkok megacity. So in this project, we have a series of microgrids that are already were already built. And what we're doing is not only conducting transactions within, say, large buildings with microgrids, with battery and solar, but we're also conducting transactions across the regulated market. So through the poles and wires on the street, right across Bangkok. This is the largest project we've delivered to date. We have done smaller cities, but we've never actually implemented a project of this scale before. I guess from our perspective, we're ready for the next challenge. We've also partnered with Japan's second largest retailer, KEPCO Kansai. And in that project, we're using by and large the VPP product that I talked about earlier before across a series of different sites. Moving down to Australia. Now, I mean, we are a global company, but we are based in Perth, Western Australia. That's the dot on the very left-hand side there of the Australian continent. So we have a range of projects in Australia, by and large across the grid and microgrid deployments. One of the more exciting applications running in Australia at the moment is the Smart Cities and Suburbs Funding Trial. So our background, although it's from the energy industry, a lot of us are also researchers. So for instance, myself, I'm part of a research institute referred to as CUSP Institute. We've been writing papers on this type of innovation for quite a while, long before Power Ledger though. And the Smart Cities and Suburb project is an Australian federal government funded project where we have put a large centralized battery into a town or a city, the city of Fremantle. And what we are doing is allowing any residents in that city with solar PV to transact electricity. We're also allowing people who don't have solar PV to buy that solar electricity from the people with solar PV connected to the network. We've partnered with the network operator and the retailer, so we provide our software to the retailer, and the network operator, the owner of the poles and wires, recoups a payment for each trade conducted over the network. So, in the Australian context, this project really has been an exemplar project in terms of policy formation in this particular country, but we do provide advice for other countries in terms of policy formation for implementing this type of innovation. In summary, this is a more comprehensive list of what I just described, but in summary, I guess from our perspective, before Power Ledger, we were looking for a software that we thought existed, that settled transactions in an affordable way, that was by and large automated, and the journey for us started by looking for this software, seeing if it existed, and it actually didn't. I mean, this was 4 years ago, so some time ago now. So ultimately, from our perspective, we solved the problem with blockchain. I mean, back then it was called Byzantine fault-tolerant state machines. It wasn't sexy. Not many people were participating in ICOs. And I guess from our perspective, what we put our global deployments down to at this point in time is the fact that we have basically started at a problem and brought in a solution. We didn't kind of create this solution and start looking for a problem. We had real projects deployed, and we had a very real issue to resolve. So with that problem-centered approach, that's what's led us to the point of deployment where we are today. And we have many more projects that are not listed in this presentation. We have very tight communications contracts with a number of different application hosts, and some prefer to announce projects before they're up and running, others prefer to announce at the closure. But we do have a Telegram group, Medium, various social media type profiles set up, and you're more than welcome to follow those to keep abreast of what we're doing. But watch this space, and there's more exciting things coming. And in terms of this space, this is an independent report conducted by Green Tech Media about the number of companies that have entered this ecosystem. And I guess from our perspective, we really welcome this. I mean, we were one of the first. But what this does is it shows there's legitimacy in this offering. I mean, a lot of companies here are very much in their infancy in terms of deployment. However, what it does is, and I alluded to this before, if you look into the literature in energy markets and the technological transition, a lot of people have likened this to the transition we've seen in telecommunications industry. And just as I mentioned before, we saw telecommunications move towards a data type model, and the thinking is that energy markets are moving towards an energy internet type model. And Viktor from GIZ, he summed this up quite well, and this is actually how it's described in the literature. But the formation of local energy markets and then interconnecting those energy markets and forming an interconnected modular type system, this is the future of energy network design. So the software is only one part of the overall transition. As mentioned before, it's distributed generation, distributed storage, and also a community will to try these new service innovations and interact with the energy market in a way that's never been done before. Ultimately, this will address issues around climate change and decarbonisation, but also it will reduce price for electricity and lead to, ultimately a much more efficient energy system, a system that can be designed as needed in the areas where it's needed most. So thank you very much for your time this evening or morning or afternoon, wherever you're listening in from. The way to contact us is quite simple, just through our website or through our Twitter. So thank you everybody for your time, and I look forward to the next presenter.
Hi there. Our next intervention is from UNDP Moldova, and my colleague Francois will connect 5 minutes later. I have here a presentation that I prepared for you. It's actually an experiment that we are doing with 2 partners, with the SunExchange and an ElectriCChain solar coin. The experiment is actually around how we can promote and produce more solar energy in Moldova and the countries in our region through connecting or better connecting private sectors, investors, and public sector. As to the Sustainable Development Goals, this experiment is directly linked to at least 3 SDGs. That's SDG 7 on affordable and clean energy, 9 on innovation and industry, and 11 on sustainable cities. As it is now in Moldova, for instance, but also in the countries in our region, the share of solar energy in the total mix of renewables is around 2–3%, so it's very low. The problem is the private sector is not actually connected, also due to limited incentives for them to invest, and therefore we are at high risk of not meeting the SDG targets. We do have, based on our data, we have about 2,400 hours of sun per year. That is a great potential that is unfortunately not being used. Also, based on our data, we do import around 70–74% of the energy that we are using, and the last 5 years the prices went up by around 50%. And therefore, with our partners, as I said, in SunExchange and ElectriCChain, we thought about this experiment, that is to connect actually big rooftops of public institutions, be it universities, hospitals in the country, to private investors and to the sun, as we say. The idea is this is a very, let's say, brief description of the business model. We have private buyers or investors on the SunExchange platform that are buying and then leasing the PV cells on the rooftops of large public institutions, giving them the possibility to the public institutions to access green energy, but also have savings on their electricity bills. And our partners in SunExchange, ElectriCChain, who are the providers of some parts of the technology, and also promoting together with us the so-called energy transition. In some more details, the first pilot that we are working on now is around the technical university. They have a potential to produce around 1 megawatt of solar energy. That's a total cost of around $1 million for the construction of the photovoltaic installation. Through the SunExchange, we do plan to raise this amount. That would then give the possibility for investors to lease the cells to the technical university, and then so we have, based on our data, we are planning for around 4–6% interest rate for the investors in around 8 to 10 years as payback period. My colleague Francois later on will provide more details on the solar coin and how this fits into the project. Just a few words about the SunExchange. They are the blockchain technology platform that is actually the vehicle for the project and for the investors to buy and lease solar cells. The ElectriCChain, the company that will support us to further incentivize private investors. And Francois will stop a bit more in details around their contribution to the project. What is there for UNDP in this project? So there are a couple of quick things. One is, well, the development, say, purpose of the project. We want really to support the accelerated achievement of some of the SDGs, as I've mentioned, to promote more solar in the energy mix of the country in Moldova, but also countries in the region. We do want to support large public institutions to go green overnight, if that's possible. Test out blockchain technology, both for investment and power generation, and last but not least, connect private sector investors in a completely new way. Thank you, and I pass to Francois.
So we're going to do a short presentation on SolarCoin. I believe time is running out a bit. And we're going to focus obviously on this project which we have in cooperation with both UNDP then in Moldova, as well as with the Sun Exchange and Photon Energy. But getting back to well, the topic, I would say here, we've heard, of course, of the GIZ, talking about a lot of different business models in the energy sector. We've heard of a crowdfunding approach then from Gabriela, then also from Dumitru here. And we've heard on microgrid solutions, peer-to-peer energy trading, for example, from Power Ledger and James. And so what we want to do, I would say, with SolarCoin is probably very simple. It's a very simple use case because we actually aim to create a currency, a global currency, which in essence uses blockchain technology, I think the Bitcoin protocol then, to support itself. So in essence, what we're building is by opposition to the gold standard or debt. What we're building is a solar currency based on solar energy and proven solar energy, that is. And the reason for that, obviously, is on the one hand, we want to accelerate, of course, the energy transition. So we're handing out those solar coins to solar power producers for free. Anybody who produces solar energy. Currently 7 million solar installations out there, and the number is growing year on year. But anybody who's producing solar energy will get those solar coins for free. So on top of those government-backed subsidies, think feed-in tariffs, think green certificates, if they're entitled to those, or a PPA then, of course. And yeah, so basically focusing with SolarCoin on SDG 7. So SolarCoin is really there to impact the whole solar industry, of course governments as well. I think of SolarCoin as a currency layer, a common denominator protocol then. But of course in the solar industry then what we aim to do is deploy through APIs as well as through scripts, the use then of SolarCoin as a digital asset. Of course, anybody can use SolarCoin. As I've mentioned, it's easily deployable. We have, for example, a wallet application for your desktop. It comes also on your smartphone, so either Android or, of course, Apple iPhones. Then what you can do is simply download the SolarCoin wallet or the Coinomi multi-wallet then, and host a SolarCoin address then. You generate, of course, your SolarCoin address, and then from there, you can start receiving SolarCoins for the energy you produce. Essentially, it's a low-cost, low-carbon solution. Think of a SolarCoin as putting the Bitcoin model on its head. What we're specifically doing is focusing on this low-carbon solution because it uses a POS algorithm. So POST blockchain is a 10,000 times more energy efficient than the Bitcoin blockchain. So by opposition to Bitcoin, you use a lot of servers, server power. You have to buy a server actually to participate as a node into the network. Well, SolarCoin You just simply download the Solarcoin wallet, run it on your desktop or on your iPhone then, and participate into the network. So it's fairly easy to deploy, fairly easy to participate in the network. It's fairly democratic in the sense that you don't really have mining power as opposed again to the Bitcoin or say Ethereum blockchains. What you do have is again, anybody participating into the system would participate as a node. So as we mentioned, you produce solar. You can participate with an affiliate. We currently have about 30 affiliates out there. Of course, ranging from small startup scale, so think websites, but also ranging to large-scale solar companies. Think SMA, for example. SMA, mentioned a bit later, but that's one of the leading inverter manufacturers and data logger manufacturers. Essentially, yeah, easy solution to deploy. We can work with a grid connection documentation. What we need to do is validate the energy. So the energy producer doing a KYE, or your energy process. This can be done, of course, based on grid connection documentation, but also based on your monitoring platform, or think your inverter, then the data which your inverter is producing. I have here a short video which will summarize this part of the Solarcoin blockchain then.
Natural resources are currently being lost at an unprecedented rate. As a solution to this, Solarcoin is a global incentive program that provides rewards to producers of solar energy. The Solarcoin Foundation rewards solar energy producers with 1 solar coin per 1 megawatt hour produced. This comes in as an extra bonus incentive, free of cost. Any solar power plant may receive digital solar coin as a reward for their positive contribution to the environment. Solar coin is global, decentralized, and independent from any government. Solar coin is using blockchain technology, just like Bitcoin, to create a secure peer-to-peer ledger that allows trading over a global network. Solar coins are held in digital wallets and can be traded from one wallet to another in just minutes. Solar coins represent real value. The network is growing every day and already encompasses thousands of people with a growing daily volume. Solar coins are transparently issued and can be collected, redeemed, or traded for any other currency. To receive solar coins, plant owners need to register their solar system with the Solarcoin Foundation. It's free to register, and once production data is submitted, the Foundation issues solar coins to the owners. Solar coins can be issued retroactively for energy produced from January 1st, 2010 up until now. The goal of the Solarcoin Foundation is to issue 98 billion coins over the next 35 years and give solar producers around the world an extra incentive to produce green energy. If you are a solar producer, contact us today and we will guide you through the process and help you get on the platform. We make it easy for you and it's completely free.
Right, so this video is produced by an affiliate, one of the affiliates of the Solarcoin Foundation. That's SolarLux, essentially based in Germany then. So why is it worth something? Essentially, what we've derived is the GDP per participant for global currencies, or if you look at digital assets, their market cap divided by the number of participants then. And so essentially, what you see here is that anybody participating into this ecosystem generates and sustains value from within. So essentially, what we're running is a network of participants, building this network of participants. Think, of course, right now, 7 million solar installations. We can work, of course, with peer-to-peer energy trading companies such as Power Ledger, the Energy Web Foundation, Grid Singularity, LO3, just to mention a few of them. But then we can also work with the solar industry then in building up then those the value then behind that. Some of the companies or some of the I would say associations which are accepting or recognizing solar coin are listed in front of you. I'll get deeper into UNDP project which we're developing them. But Solar Aid and Power One for One have distributed them solar coins to as a charity. In that case, we're also a member of the Climate Change Coalition, Solar Power Europe as well, and also been recognized by the International Renewable Energy Agency as a reward for solar power producers. And basically, who's involved? Just throwing a couple of names then out there, and what it represents for them, for these companies. Aqua Power is a leading IPP in the Middle East. They accept solar coins. They've received solar coins for their solar installations, but have also been built in solar coins by their tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers. So they're O&M suppliers then. And SMA is trial testing the SolarCoin API directly on its Sun Portal platform. So essentially the API can be easily integrated on the monitoring platform, any monitoring platform. I mean, this is a open source tools. And we've deployed and shipped in 68 countries and incentivized about 11 terawatt hours of solar energy. To put things in perspective, that's the amount of energy consumed by 11 million households, US households in a month. So that's quite a lot of energy. Now, specifically focusing on a use case, I'm not saying that that's the only thing then, but here in the crowdfunding sector, we teamed up with the Altfin Lab at UNDP and UNDP Moldova to identify some buildings where we were going to integrate them a solar installation. So the solar installation itself is being crowdfunded through Bitcoin. So what Sun Exchange provides them in this case is a funding for solar installations anywhere in the world using the Bitcoin protocol. And you can actually crowdfund a single cell. So that's quite exciting. You can crowdfund through Bitcoin a $5 piece of equipment, and you co-own a part of that solar installation. We've teamed up with Photon Energy, who is doing then the site assessment. Of course, locating the amount of solar panels, the number of solar panels which we can put on the Technical University of Moldova roof then. And the way it works is essentially as a standard PPA. So think of it as being deployed with an SPV. The SPV runs a PPA with the Technical University of Moldova during a lease term then. In this case, 25 years, accrued 6%, of course. For the Technical University of Moldova, what it means is that they're receiving solar electricity for a fixed amount, or at least for a known amount, a known price. It equates to 10 euro cents per kilowatt hour then, during those 25 years, augmented by 6% on a yearly basis. But at least so they know what they're getting their electricity billed at. So the SPV itself is being crowdfunded by through the Sun Exchange platform. People who own Bitcoin can actually crowdfund the solar installation itself, being registered then as a company. It signs a PPA, so a lease agreement with the Technical University of Moldova, by which the solar installation will deliver for the period of 20 years solar energy then directly to the Technical University of Moldova. Of course, every year there's an increase in the price, what we call an escalation in the tariff. And so essentially what the crowdfunders do is they use Bitcoin as a rail to finance this solar installation. On solar cell crowd sale overview, so the next slide, what we believe is that the feed-in tariff, the PPA is going to hover around 10 euro cents per kilowatt hour, of course with an increase then of 6% year on year. And essentially these solar power producers then co-own a part of that solar installation. They can finance as little as a cell, so a single 5-watt cell could be crowdfunded through the Sun Exchange platform, but essentially they also receive benefits for financing then the solar installation. Of course, on top of that, they also receive solar at the rate of 1 solar coin per megawatt hour. So anybody who roughly finances about 1 kilowatt peak of the solar installation would receive roughly 1 solar coin on a yearly basis then. And so the deal summary, the next slide, what we have here then is essentially the Technical University of Moldova, which is entering then into a 20-year lease for solar energy then being provided by this SPV. Of course, the Sun Exchange crowdfunds it, opens it then to solar crowdfunders anywhere in the world then. Photon Energy is going to build, operate and maintain then the solar installation. We're getting, of course, support from both UNDP and AltFin Lab, so Alternative Finance Lab, for financing then the solar installation. And with the goal, of course, for SolarCoin to being handed for free then to these solar power producers, and coming on top. So as an additional benefit, the goal being there to increase then the return on investment of that solar installation. Basically, the ultimate goal then of SolarCoin is, in this case then, to being the first solar-backed currency at a global scale, then running at a global scale. Well, that's it. Last slide. Thank you very much for tuning in and for the opportunity then of explaining one of the projects on which we're working and collaborating, in this case then with UNDP. The aim, of course, of the project is to scale up towards 140 different countries throughout the world, with where UNDP has also regional offices then. This, of course, for the goal of providing solar energy to populations then in need.
Thank you very much, all the panelists, for the presentations. We received a lot of questions, and we will start the first one with Gabriela. Gabriela, the question that we received is, can the flexible demand and supply solutions also apply to heat in addition to electricity?
Hi, thanks a lot, Aris. This is a very interesting question. In fact, we didn't look at heating. I believe when we have decentralized solutions, it would be more difficult to apply it. But for example, in a district heating solution or district cooling solution, could possibly be something to study and to consider. It's actually from a first idea an interesting area to have a look. Yeah, basically that's it. We are all trying to see where the opportunities are, and we have seen also from the previous panelists that we are all in the beginning, so any great ideas are welcome. So yeah, that's it. Thanks a lot for the question. Back to you, Aris.
Thank you, Gabriela, for your response. The next question is for Viktor. Viktor, I hope you are still online with us.
I am, no worries.
And the question for you is, how do DLT, lower potential entry buyers, when most people in the base of the pyramid lack education, not to mention financial education in that mysterious country in Africa?
That's a great question. I mean, we have the opportunity to build up capacities as well while implementing this project. The digital literacy and everything which comes along is key to make sure that these projects will be successful, and this is something we have on our agenda. We don't only focus on the technical side, but as well on the social side, the educational side, and obviously the legal side as well. But yeah, this is something we identified as one of the bottlenecks, and we will target it.
Thank you, Victor. The next question is for James. And James, the question is, what kind of project is developed in India? Is Power Ledger engaging in projects in other developing countries?
Yes, so the Indian project is a partnership, a strategic partnership with Tech Mahindra. And what we have deployed is a series of microgrids. Also, so basically the UGrid software plus electric vehicle charging is of great interest to that particular strategic partner. In terms of emerging economies, so we do have a series of projects in early discussions, I mean, right throughout Africa, through varying countries within. And I guess from our perspective, you know, our mission is the democratization of energy and the decarbonisation of electricity. And so in that democratization piece, particularly with asset germination, there is a focus within our company to you know, provide services to those areas. Just to pick up on the question for Victor that came before, and I have to kind of chime in here. In emerging economies, it's quite common where inflation in the cash is so rampant and out of control that a lot of those nations is, I mean, from a first world view, you might take a view of, you might use, I mean, the term in the question was primitive, but you'll find that digital payment services like M-Pesa, they have absolutely exploded in Africa. Like, you can go to open air markets and buy a melon, and you're not paying with cash. People are paying in mobile phone minutes that you can send to one another, or some other form of digital payment. So in some cases, that these areas, it's kind of like mobile phones leapfrogging landline phones, and digital payment leapfrogging you know, traditional you know, commodity or, you know, hard physical value changing over when a digital payment could proceed. And then for energy markets in those areas, it's not a far cry for them to be digitally paying for electricity as well. So yeah, for us, certainly we're highly focused on that. And from a distributed energy perspective, and more from a policy perspective, you know, it's this technology, distributed generation and storage, that would enable us to provide 100% of electrification rate for the entire world. You know, at the moment, we fall short, we fall 16% short. But, you know, in those areas, bad things happen in the dark. And I think the policy catch cry is, you know, you can have an economy, you can have electricity without economy, but you can't have economy without electricity.
Thank you, James. The next question is for Francois. I suppose, Francois, you're online now. Everything is working?
Yeah, we are, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. We're glad that you're back. The question is, what barriers or obstacles exist at the moment to accelerate the adoption of distributed ledger technologies in the energy sector?
Yeah, that's a good question, I would say. I mean, that's probably the one which we tackle, I would say, with a solar coin. So obviously, I mean, we're talking about regulation, and not only financial regulation, but also on the energy sector side. If you're discussing with each individual regulatory authority, then there's one in each country. Sometimes there are several. If you look at Belgium, for example, that's in the energy sector, there's actually 3 then. So I'd say it's essentially going around regulation then, on that topic then. And of course, the more common topic of regulation on digital assets. That's a big point. Then of course there's education, I would say, of the markets. Then, so what can you do with digital assets? And again, that's where SolarCoin fits or ticks in the box pretty easily, in the sense that it's a Bitcoin for solar power producers, which is given for free. So essentially, it's easy. It's easier to grasp them, or as a way of entry, then it's easier to educate, I would say, the market than in general.
Thank you very much for your response. The next question is for Dumitru. Dumitru, the question is, it seems the positive effects are very easy to grasp in projects like the one with Technical University Moldova. Could you also talk a bit on the potential disadvantages?
So I'm not sure if Dumitru is online actually at the moment, but I'm happy to take that question as well. Essentially, I don't think it's really disadvantages, because what we're doing here is electrifying developing nations. Of course, as we've touched on it with a Power Ledger, for example, again, LO3 Energy, for example, these are companies which are looking at microgrid applications then for powering the sector. In this case, the project being deployed with the Sun Exchange is an SPV. So it's a facility which is being deployed at a site, or say on a green field, for example. It doesn't have to be on a rooftop then, and bringing electricity to those to that region then directly. Then I'd say it's more a question of technical difficulty. So more often, because it's in these developing nations, you don't have that many projects, solar projects. Then it's a question of getting the permits, getting the boots on the ground, and deploying. So doing the effective, building the effective solar installation. That's probably more of the concern than rather than a problem in itself.
Thank you, Francois. The next question is for Viktor. Viktor, the question is, for emerging economies, which blockchain-based solutions do you think have the greater potential to contribute to the achievement of Sustainable Development Goal 7?
So if I got this right, which blockchain-based solutions in terms of in which field of the energy system, I assume. So from my point of view, I mean, everything which comes along grids is a great thing to achieve Sustainable Development Goal number 7, because grids are key in this whole thing, building up grids, connecting different generation facilities or small-scale generation facilities, and using the blockchain. This is the major thing which can benefit the SDGs, if, of course, obviously you use renewable energies for it. Otherwise, it will not have that effect.
I'm sorry, I'd like to build on that, because that's an excellent question, I would say, on which we can rebound, actually. So the European Parliament, back in May, has actually identified a couple of blockchain solutions which were low cost and low carbon as well. And POS and POA are among them. So I would say that these are blockchains which are easier to deploy, more democratic, and of course have a lower carbon footprint. So probably in your choice then of deploying a blockchain solution, you might be more inclined than to running these kind of these blockchains then, as opposed to proof of work then. So the Bitcoin blockchain. Just wanted to comment.
I mean, if we're talking about the whole design of the blockchain and which blockchains are to be preferred, I agree with you. I mean, definitely POS is much more favored than a proof of work consensus, which lays underneath it. I'm always kind of skeptical when it comes to proof of authority, because it sometimes narrows down the big plus of distributed decentralization, everything which comes along. So if you still rely on like one central authority using a POA, this is not this can sometimes limit the possibilities of the DLT.
Agreed. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your responses. I think we have to end the webinar. It took more than 1.5 hours, despite the fact we informed everybody it would last 75 minutes. It's a very interesting and I might say a hot topic for this period. So finally, we come to the end of the webinar. I would like to thank the panelists for the informative and interesting presentations and the audience for their active participation. We hope the presentations will be beneficial for all stakeholders involved in blockchain and sustainable energy. Thank you for your attention and wish you a good day or night from Copenhagen.